the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Please be seated. Today's gospel lesson contains, of course, a very familiar piece of scripture. When we say every Sunday, as we said in the earlier part of the communion service, it's certainly a familiar piece of scripture and one of my particular favorites. I like this commandment from our Lord for several reasons. First of all, Jesus sets forth for us wonderful guidelines by which we can lead productive and fulfilling lives. Love God, love yourself, and love your neighbor. And secondly, Jesus once and for all tells us what is really important if we want to be decent human beings. And finally, Jesus tells us that these two commandments are what all the laws in the Old Testament were measured by. They were certainly followed by the prophets of old. And if we follow this simple but exact formula, then we will not be stealing, lying, coveting, worshiping false gods, or any of the things contrary to the law of Moses. Many people think that Jesus might have invented these two commandments, but he didn't, quite frankly. You can find them in the Old Testament. The first is found in the book of Deuteronomy, the 6th chapter. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And the second is found in the book of Leviticus, the 19th chapter, the 18th verse. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against one of your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord your God. And the genius of Jesus bringing these two commandments together is almost unreal. St. Paul recognized the responsibility to love when he said, therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. And that law is what Paul is referring to. Now, we can understand the passion to love God. I doubt that there's anyone in this church this morning who doesn't love God, or you wouldn't be here. We can understand the passion that we have in loving God. We can recognize it in others and even long for it in our own lives. But Jesus doesn't stop there. And that is somewhat of a problem, isn't it? Most of us would like nothing more than a warm, fuzzy, spiritual connection. But you see, Jesus didn't stop there. Jesus understood that loving God has a certain consequence that has stipulations as well. Loving God requires a valid passion, but there's an equally valid passion that Jesus speaks about, and that is this loving your neighbor as yourself. And to have a passion for God is not enough. We have to be filled with his passion for ourselves and for our neighbor, and that is what it means to really know God's love. Love God, love yourself, and love your neighbor. Now, loving God is, I think, the easy part. Loving self gets a little complicated for some folks. But this second commandment about being filled with love for ourselves means that God, you see, has this conduit, if you will, that transforms us and speaks to us in very special ways. And if you think that it's humanly impossible to love everyone, perhaps it is, but God never said it was going to be easy. You see, what we have to do is give our love to God. We are to love God as we are with all that we can of our heart, mind, and soul. And in return, allow God to transform that love into us, hoping that his unending love for us will transfer in some way to loving our neighbors as ourselves. human love united with divine love is a gift of love. And that sometimes becomes difficult because, as you and I well know, some people are just not easy to love. Someone once said, the more I get to know the human race, the more I love my dog. Dogs are loyal, dependable, eager to please, and quick to forgive and forget. And don't you wish that people were more like that? Sometimes, no matter how hard we try to have a good relationship with some people, it just doesn't work. And so that brings us to this question: can we indeed love everyone we're supposed to love? That is the question that the lawyer in today's parable asked Jesus. Just who is my neighbor? So when Jesus commands us in today's gospel lesson to love God, love yourself, and love your neighbor, we begin to analyze his words as, well, I certainly can love God. No problem there. After all, that's what we Christians do. We're lovers of God, and we readily admit to doing that. And most people love themselves. Some have problems that cause them to wind up on the psychiatrist's couch because they have low self-esteem for themselves or whatever. But let us, for the sake of simplicity, say that, well, most people are okay with themselves. And that leaves the third part of this love triangle that I always like to call loving God, loving self, over here, loving your neighbor. That's where it gets confusing. If the answer to that question lies in the example Jesus provided to the lawyer through the parable of the Good Samaritan, then I believe that is what a majority of committed Christians would have no trouble in understanding. I mean, coming upon an accident where someone is in great distress would not be a problem for most Christians. Most would at least stop and offer assistance, or at least put in a call to 911. We would probably stay in to help arrive. Some, if they were trained, might even offer some help in the way of first aid if they were trained professional. Others might just offer up prayers. And every time I hear an ambulance or see an ambulance go by, I have to stop and say a little prayer because I know that someone is in deep trouble. I may not be able to help them. I'd certainly ask God to intercede. And so I believe that most committed Christians would do so, but this is where it gets sticky. Well, if our neighbor includes, for example, this poor man who seems to be content to simply live out his life by milking the welfare system, a system that's been created by government as a huge entitlement system that, quite frankly, threatens our own economic survival as a nation, are we willing to love those kinds of people? Now, I've had a good bit of experience with homeless people, for example. When I was in the church full time, we used to run an advertisement on the church page of the local newspaper. Every Monday morning, without exception, I would have folks appear at the church door knocking with a list of the newspaper in hand, checking us off one at a time. Anglican being first was the first place they came. And I tell you, I've been abused so many times by people asking for help that I finally gave that up. We used to have a food pantry here and pass out food, and I finally said, I'm sorry, I can't help you. No cash on hand, but I'll be happy to refer you to a certain social agency that can give you help. How do we feel about the immigrants who now are crossing our border in great numbers, putting an undue strain on our infrastructure, the educational system, the social welfare system? Are we willing to reach out with compassion, or would we simply prefer that they go back where they came from? And so you see, loving unconditionally is a pretty tall order. The love that Jesus is talking about often requires forgiveness, understanding, compassion, and the ability to overlook or put behind us a lot of prejudiced and preconceived notions that given our rather frail, fragile, and complicated human nature, is not always easy to accomplish. Jack Zavada, writing in a magazine about Christianity, says, to love like Jesus, we need to understand a simple truth. We cannot live the Christian life on our own, and this is important. Sooner or later, in the midst of our frustration, we come to the conclusion that we're doing something wrong. It's not working. Our best efforts just don't cut it. All of us want to love like Jesus. We want to be generous, forgiving, and compassionate enough to love people unconditionally. But no matter how hard we try, it just doesn't work because our humanness gets in the way. I personally believe that the only way we can deal with the problem of unconditional love is found in the words of John chapter 1, verses 7 through 10. If you abide in me, Jesus says, and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and that will be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. And he commands us to abide in his love. In other words, it's impossible to love unconditionally without the abiding love of Jesus Christ in our lives. It's that simple. He has to be a part of us and who we are. He bought us, and we're his. A wonderful story about a little boy who built a toy sailboat. It took him a long time to do this. Very meticulous about what he did. He would take this little boat out to the park every day and sail the little boat in the pond. And because he loved this little boat and had been so much time putting it together, he was very careful about not letting it get too far from the shore. But then the inevitable day came when the little boat sailed out beyond his reach, and he had gotten himself so trying to retrieve it, but the little boat had gone out too far for the little guy to rescue it. A few weeks later, while he was walking through town, he saw his boat in the window of a second-hand shop. He went to the owner and said, "You found my boat! I made that boat, it's mine, and I'd like to have it back." The man behind the counter said, "Well, maybe it was your boat at one time, but now it's my boat. And if you want it, you'll have to pay me $20. $20, said the little boy. It seemed like an enormous amount of money. He had no idea how he could ever come up with that much money. And so he started to hang his head and walk out the store. But the owner said, "Wait." He said, "If you'd like to earn a little money, I could use some help around here." And so it was agreed, tidy up the shelves, sweep the floors. And the owner would give him a few bucks. And the boy would go and save up his money. And finally the day came when he brought this lump of money into the store and gave the owner those crumpled up bills and bought his little boat back. He was thrilled. And as he walked out the door holding his boat like a long-lost friend, he said, "You're mine twice now." You're mine the first time because I made you. And you're mine again because I bought you. You know, God constantly reminds us that he not only did he create us, but he redeemed us as well. He bought us back with the precious blood of Jesus Christ. We're his because he created us. We're his because he bought us out of our slavery to sin.